Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Spill the Beans, the GBC Asia Pacific Volume 1. Today's topic: how climate change can impact our lives and immigration. Today's guest speaker is Amerika Garcia Grewal, okay? And she's the founder of the Action Committee for Diversity and Inclusion, and also the Deputy Regional Vice Chair of Asia Pacific. And she previously chaired the Hispanic Caucus and a member of the 2020 Affirmative Action Committee. And I'm your day moderator, James Lockett. How you doing, Amerika? How you doing?
Hi, James. How are you doing? And I didn't chair the affirmative action committee. I was one of the members on it. So it is. We now have a standing action committee for diversity and inclusion. But previously, the affirmative action committee came into being prior to every presidential year to make sure that Democrats abroad had a diverse and representative contingent that went to Democratic National Convention every year. So, but yeah, I am literally sweating my butt off because we have no power on the main island of Viti Levu here in Fiji, and I'm just very thankful for power banks that bring this session to you today.
Okay, I appreciate it. Right along with climate change too as well, having no power
Mm,
and the impact in Fiji. It tells a lot right there on today's topic. Also, you're a Texas voter, correct?
I am. I am. I
And how long
vote
you
in
been?
the I live in
Go
the
ahead, I'm
border
sorry.
town of Eagle Pass, Texas, which is Texas 23. And interestingly enough, my hometown is about 40 miles south of where 17,000 Haitian immigrants tried to cross over, which was the largest deportation event in recent history in the United States.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It's very astonishing
Mm.
too, because recently the Department, the Inspector General for the Immigration refused to investigate the Haitian immigration issue with the members on horseback, well, particularly as whipping, and it brings back some deep wounds of memory back in slavery days. So, well, very, very sad too as well. So you're very passionate about the climate change, correct?
Yes, yes, I am. So I'm currently in Raki, Fiji. I usually stay in Suva, which is the capital city. But since April, I've been in Raki. And the house that I'm currently in was destroyed during 2016's tropical cyclone Winston. It was called a once in a lifetime storm. And at the time, it was the strongest storm to ever make landfall in the South Pacific. Once in a lifetime storm. So this family built back, they built back better. And December of 2020, this coast was hit once again by a once in a lifetime storm. And thankfully, the hit on this particular home was not as hard as it was in 2016, and also the repairs held. But to have two once in a lifetime storms that are both billed as the strongest storm to ever make landfall, it's incredible. We're not supposed to have storms that are this strong and that are this frequent. And the incredible thing is that this is an El Nino. For us, it's summer. This is an El Nino summer for us, and we're looking at having even more storms now in 2021 and in early 2022. So climate change is not something that it's like, oh, does it exist? Does it not exist? It absolutely totally does exist. The climate, the planet is warming. It is caused by humans. We're absolutely totally 100% sure about that. Let me actually rephrase that. Scientists, 97% of the scientists right now say that it's due to humans. I think the other 3% are funded by Shell Energy and other energy companies. It's really, really bad, and we have to fix it. We're running out of time to fix it. Whatever we do, we are already seeing the effects of climate change across the planet. And we're seeing it with things like the 17,000 Haitian immigrants that showed up, on my parents' doorstep just a few months ago.
And as representative of the GBC, how can we help fix that? Because it's a breaking down system. It's a broken down system.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's absolutely totally a broken down system. So one of the things we could do is talk about why this is happening, and when people lose their homes and their jobs, the elements that give stability to their life, then they want to look for stability elsewhere. So, for example, just down from me, there is a resort, a very, very popular resort for diving. And I was talking to the owner one time, and she talked about how hard it was to rebuild and the uncertainty they had. You know, once they rebuilt, would they get back their clientele from previous years and everything else? And then the morning after the December 2020 storm, they went out, and she said just a knot in her stomach. She's like, I don't think I can do this again. You know, rebuilding back once you can do, twice maybe, but after a while, people just give up and they leave. And actually, she and her family left the country. And in the case of Fiji, country with less than 1 million people, between 2017 and 2020, there were 20,000 people who left the country. Now, Fiji's immigration usually goes to places like Australia, New Zealand, not the United States. And often we see it as, you know, educational moves. People go with family, things of that sort. So it's not always captured, but you know, people are looking for stability. A lot of times what we see is a rural to urban migration, and Fiji has certainly seen that. And again, I'm speaking based on what I know, but these patterns are happening around the world. There's actually an October 2021 report that was released by the White House. And I believe I sent you this link. We can drop into the chat if you want to. In that report, they estimated that 143 million people may move by 2050. 143 million people. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. So
Will your friend migrate to the U.S.?
Just may migrate from where they are. So what we're talking about here, and I don't have the stats for World War II, but what we're talking about is mass human movement on a scale that dwarfs what we saw after World War II, which previously the migration after World War II, just the huge flows of refugees after World War II was, you know, the largest seen. We're talking about people moving the way they did with the Ice Age, you know, which if you follow any of the forensic data, anthropological data, is just incredible. People crossed, you know, thousands and thousands of miles on foot, and it's where, you know, I don't know. It's how humans can be scattered around the globe. So we're talking about a huge, huge thing that's going to happen. There's a couple things that we're looking at. One is we have to address the climate change itself. We've got to go to climate change. Oh, and there's the link right there in the chat. And sometimes we hear stuff with climate change is things like, you know, get rid of straws, carry bags, things like that. But the fact of the matter is that what's happening is so big that we absolutely totally must have large scale collective action. And so the best thing that we as an individual can do is speak up and demand change of governments and businesses. And what we're asking for is to transition away from fossil fuels. We're asking to get rid of fossil fuel subsidies. You know, it's like we had an asteroid coming at us, like we're dinosaurs looking up at asteroids and saying like, oh, hey, let's make them go faster. That's what these fossil fuel subsidies are doing. We have to transition to clean energy. And, you know, we need to be asking every single politician, every single government official, what their plan is to combat climate change. You know, it needs to be something that's just you know, written into their DNA. This is our climate change plan. If you take a look at where climate change comes from, you know, we as individuals can make choices that affect this, but the energy sectors, agriculture, transportation, construction, that's where you know, all this carbon is coming from. So, you know, we as individuals can cut food waste. We can switch to a plant-based diet. We can choose housing that is more energy efficient, you know, things like solar panels on our house. If you're living in a cold climate, plugging leaks in your home, smart thermostat, drive fewer miles, fly less. You know, I haven't been on a plane in so long now, but you know, go to the Zoom meetings instead of flying and things like that. But all of that is just a drop in everything if we don't have this large scale collective action.
What you say about having clean energy, I agree with that too as well. But some people might say, wait a minute now, what about the COP26 summit recently? in Glasgow when you have all the executives fight on their jets. I mean, you have some people say, wait a minute, okay, you talk about climate change, but you have people talk about climate change just to do something totally opposite and different. But how can we combat that, you know? We have to lead by
Yeah.
example.
Yes, we do. And you know, we have these Zoom meetings that we're doing right now. Um, but unfortunately, a lot of the things that happen, we have to get people into a room together, you know, and you've got carbon offsets that can help with that. But if we can just fly less, that right
Okay.
there is one of the key points. But also, you know, it's the overall energy sector. You know, if those jets were able to fly using wind power or solar energy, then it wouldn't have the same impact if using fossil fuels. But right now, all of our jets are using fossil fuels. So we need to invest in scientific and technical innovation to do that, which actually is one of the key things of the Build Back Better bill. It's got 555 billion allocated for climate change programs. 320 of that is tax incentives for producers and purchasers of wind, solar, and nuclear power. It's, you know, trying to speed up this transition away from oil, gas, and coal. And you know, for you and me, if we were to buy an electrical vehicle, then it would also be a benefit for us. There's incentives for that, as well as for things like energy efficient appliances. More money to go into climate-friendly farming and forestry, as well as research to support all those kind of things. And again, back into infrastructure, money to go to communities to support renewable energy projects. If you go to, I believe it's the Arizona State University. I'm not from Arizona. It is the one in Tempe. Their parking lots are covered with solar panels. And so you have solar panels over the parking lots that shade the vehicles. And so you've got, you know, a cooler parking lot as well as feeding energy in. So this is an example of a way that we've got, you know, charging stations and power and, you know, working smarter and all those different kinds of things. So.
Yeah, I do think that, you know, we got a long way to go when it comes to EV, electrical vehicles. Here in Hong Kong, I work in national school, and we do have about 3 or 4 parking space reserved for EV vehicles. But nobody parked there because all vehicles that we drive, including myself, is gas. I'm guilty of charge, but the next car I'm going to buy will be an EV car. Okay, because I was
Yes.
talking to Diller I was speaking to Diller last year. He says starting in the year 2021, Hong Kong government will go towards more EV versus gas cars. So in the future, we'll make that change in Hong Kong, which I'm glad to see that. For someone like not Mitch McConnell, Senator Manchin, for example, his state is a coal state, produce coal. That's economic.
Yeah.
How can you convince someone like that that clean energy is the way to go?
You know, I
And the
don't think
voters
that
as
we
well.
can convince them.
What about the
Yeah,
voters?
I don't think that we can convince them. I think that we have to put so many more inducements in place that they abandon their position and, you know, they go towards the inducements because I mean, come on, coal is dead, you know, oil and natural gas, it's dead. It's coming from the dinosaurs. If we don't want to end up like the dinosaurs, we've got to change. And we've spent so much time trying to convince folks we could be putting that energy into other ways. We could be doing other things.
Okay. So how does the climate change impact on security? For example, in the report,
Mhm.
you mentioned about
Um,
national security is impacted.
mhm, yes. So climate change is a force multiplier. And so it in itself does not destabilize a government. But I don't know if you saw some of the pictures coming out of Vancouver from just this week. Um, we already have a buildup of cargo ships at our ports up and down the Pacific seaboard, and Vancouver just had their entire infrastructure underwater because of all the floods that they had. And that's what
Yeah,
climate
yeah.
change does. It adds to deforestation. It gives us floods. Meanwhile, another part of the country may be having drought, leading to famine. We have stronger cyclones, hurricanes, things of that sort. And so what you already have, you have even more of. So we already had a backup of goods coming into the country at our ports. And then when the port is underwater, you're not able to function around that. In the report that I sent you that October, I actually, I don't remember if it was in the climate migration report draft, but there is an article in the New York Times recently, which I may have cited here, and I'll have to drop this link to you. But one of the things that's happening is um, climate change is having an impact on health. So, for example, people are suffering from a pandemic surge at the same time that the hospitals are losing power due to wildfires, or their entire bottom level has been flooded out due to floods, or they're not able to maintain operating temperatures for the machines in the hospitals because they have such a heat spike, and those kind of things. I will have to get the link for you on this, but it was incredible. It was talking about how during one of the heat surges, one of the heat waves that came through, doctors were treating people who had burns, third-degree burns on their feet
Mhm.
from walking across hot asphalt. It's not just that; it's air quality. As the air quality deteriorates, and Asia certainly has problems with air quality left, right, and center. So I believe Indonesia has the palm tree burning for the palm oil. Um, and we have to find better ways to do things so that we can
Right.
breathe, that we have water, so that we have food. Um, Drought affects the foods that we eat, not just scarcity. So, for example, things like almonds are so water
Right.
intensive. And right now, California is the source of most of the almonds that we eat in the United States. It's possible that in our lifetime, we're not going to have almonds anymore because it's such a water intensive crop. And we're seeing this in New Mexico. So where the nut farmers and the chili farmers, that
Right.
hatch chilies, they're in direct competition for water sources. So we're going to have less diversity in the foods that we eat, but also if you have any kind of disruption, again, from climate change, then you won't have access to those foods at all. Now we're talking about a luxury item here, almonds and chilies,
Mhm.
but in other parts of the world that leads to malnutrition and famine. We mentioned heat-related mortality as well. But there's some other interesting things. There's increased numbers of premature births, as well as things like expanded habitats for yellow fever, dengue, chikungunya, and also environments that support things like cholera. Um, you know, uh, Things that most of the time we say like, oh, we've gotten rid of this, but yet we see outbreaks of those when you've got you're flooding, all these different things exacerbated by the climate change there. Longer allergy seasons, that's another one there. One of the ones that just blew me away was kidney disease. So we've got folks who are outside working and the temperature has gone up, but their working habits haven't changed. And so in talking to a nurse on the US-Mexico border, he was talking about how they expelled this young man who had severe kidney disease. And kidney disease, a young onset of people who don't have any history of it, everything else, is something that's being tied to climate change. It's just the impact of the higher temperatures on the body and less access to water.
Wow, I didn't realize that. That's pretty phenomenal. Wow, that's amazing. Well, it's not amazing. It's pretty sad too as well. Go back to
Mm.
Canada. I did read in the paper this week. I was kind of horrified when I saw that. I thought, wait a minute, I'm watching third world country right here. I mean, we take a modernized country like Canada, you see the road completely wash out, you know, and
Mm.
just imagine people in third world country what they experience. I mean, it's pretty
Mm.
sad. And we do as a race of people, whether white, black, Republican, Democrat, we need to take and change. We need to control how we do things in the environment. It will have an impact, believe it or not. Speaking of impact, here in Asia, you mentioned before, so many things, people burning things, is traditional, okay, in their culture, you know, and that's a different mindset altogether right there. Like in Chinese Hong Kong culture, they burn paper all the time during certain holidays period. They cleanse the soul, and you have paper particles flying in the air. They add more
Mhm.
to the carbon in the air too as well. Things in nature. Some of this stuff more culture related. If I change a mindset, but some people when I change because of that, then it'll be a challenge in itself. Like changing, Cindy mentioned mine about the coal mining in his Virginia state. And at the same time, you got people in Asia Pacific. It's tradition they burn like palm leaves. They burn paper too as well. It's all about changing minds. You know, as a member of a conservative movement, myself and the Democratic Party, I feel that it's my job responsibility to educate people about the climate change, the impact would have on us by generation. Because when I was growing up, we have adult care about my generation. Now I'm an adult. I need to care about my daughter's generation and her and my grandkids and great great grandkids generation too as well. If we want to survive as a planet, because you look at the movies coming out in the past 10 years, movie imitate life, life imitate movie, vice versa. You know, you got the name of the movie called In a Day's World, Tomorrow, something like that. You know, where that the ice age hit in the U.S., everything froze over because of climate. You know, and you have one movie when the big floods happened because of climate change. You know, when you think about it, these things can happen for real. So we need very, very cautious about that. Okay. Well, America, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. You have anything you'd like to say to wrap things up?
Thank you so much for having me. I do want to do one thing, and that is encourage everybody to go look up who your senators are, look up who your House representative is, and send them a message. They usually have a website, and you can send a message and say, if you can do one thing, you need to abolish fossil fuel subsidies. We have got to get the carbon out of the air. And when you walk into a business, if you have any chance to interact with anybody with something larger than yourself, be like, what's your climate change plan? How are you addressing this? Because right now money is what's talking. And we see this. I made a joke about the 3% of scientists in the pay of the energy companies. There's more of us than there are of them. And we have to be using our voices. We must have large scale collective action. And so, if you've listened this far through this podcast today, I really do ask you to, take a moment and contact your congressman and say, we've got to transition away from fossil fuels. We have got to get rid of fossil fuel subsidies. We have to be making a plan for the future because climate change is here, it's real. And it's changing everything. So we've got to be flexible and change with it. Otherwise, we're not going to be here. But also, and this is kind of a secondary type thing, we've got to be taking a look at what we do with immigration. I mentioned that impact that we have on pregnancies. We are having more premature children born now, and we know it's tied to climate change, but it's really complicated how it's happening. One of the ways that you bring in, people with skills and with abilities that we need in the country is through immigration. And so one thing that we could be doing right now to address climate change that's disproportionately falling on countries in the global south, but also the needs of a country, an industrialized country like the United States, is through immigration. And instead of saying like, build a wall, keep them all out, what we can be looking at is like, how can we be smart about what we need in the United States? And, how can we use our humanitarian power, our foreign aid and everything to address this issue here? So, but large scale collective action, number one, fight climate change. And number two, get folks, around the world in a place that the fabric of our world is not torn apart.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. On behalf of the GBC, thank you for joining today, especially when you have a power outage right now, your location in Fiji. My heart goes out to you. Try to stay cool and stay cool. It'll be nighttime soon.
Yeah,
Hopefully you can stay cool down a little bit.
hoping so.
Also, a quick reminder, everyone, January the 15th is voter registration day. Make sure you register to vote in the midterm 2022 is around the corner. It's very important that we keep the House and keep the Senate, okay? And keep the Build Back Better plan moving and going forward. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, Jane.